Good evening, everybody out there. Hope you're doing all right. Thank you for joining us again for Southern Art Wider World. We got a few minutes before we dive into the program, and joined here by Zaire Love. And Zaire, how have you been these past few weeks since we've gotten together on the virtual program?
You know, I've been good. How about yourself?
I'm hanging in there. You know, we had another hurricane. Yeah. That's just part of living in Walter Anderson's world, but we made it through. And this one was fun. I know, people will be treated to the videos that you put together, but I did want to ask you, because we're talking about the Mississippi River and you're in Memphis, big part of Mississippi River culture up there, but I don't think you'd ever been on the river. And as part of this program, you got to go on the river. So what was that like?
It was a beautiful experience. If you would have told me like 2 years ago that I would be in a canoe in the middle of the Mississippi River, I would be like, oh no. But like this time, it just felt so serene. It felt very peaceful. I never felt like, oh, this water goes very, very deep and you might tip over. Like I never felt that. You really do feel one with nature, like the water, the trees, the dirt, the sand. Like I really felt like in my mind, I could understand why Walter Anderson went to like Horn Island and things of that sort, because it does bring like this peacefulness,
Yeah, and you're in good hands too. Shout out to Quapaw Canoe Company. I mean, and I've never been on the river with John Ruskey and his team and Mark River and all them. But did you feel safe? Because there is a bit of a fear factor to being on a large body of water.
Yeah, I felt very safe. Now, driving to the river, I was just like, where are we going? Because we had to go through some backwoods and this, that, and third. So actually going there was more scary than actually like being on the water. Like it was very much so a lot of safety, measures. And they were just like, hey, we got you. And because they were very calm, I was calm. And we even had a dog on board. So it was like, okay, we're all chilling and we're going to island. I believe it's Island 63. So it was good. I really enjoyed it. Shout out to Rusky and Mark River and John Canoe.
That's awesome. Well, I want to remind everybody out there who's watching that this is an interactive program to the extent that you want it to be. So if you're watching on YouTube or Facebook, you can throw your comments in there and of course, tell us where you're coming from. We always like to hear where you're coming from. We've danced across the South and beyond during this program series, and we're going to continue to do that. But maybe we have some Delta people. Maybe we have some people who know about the Mississippi River only in name and know about the blues because of its legacy, but maybe not all the nitty gritty stuff under the topsoil. And that's what we're going to get into tonight. So Zaire, we're going to be joined by her a little later on. She's going to be represented well by the videos during this program. But with that being said, let's jump into it.
It all starts at the southern part of the map. The influence the globe, ain't nothing harder than that. We way smarter in fact than the stories that you heard about us. Determination invert the image, we learn in progress. It's all a process, rebuild and regrow. When the value's much more than the silver and gold. See, the stories passed down through the soil and the dirt, and we rose from the ashes, so we loyal to the earth. And we royal from our birth, see the beauty of the landscape. Gulf Coast waters crashing on the sandbanks. It's like a diamond but hitting in plain sight. Gotta let that light shine, concealing it ain't right. So I take my time, turn the page, make a line. How I feel when I'm in the Mississippi state of mind.
Where the cotton grows high, the tide moves slow, the river belongs just to get us on home to Mississippi. To get us on home to Mississippi.
So tonight's program of Southern Art Wider World is themed The Big River and the Delta Blues. And to orient you on where we are, this is a project of the museum, the Walter Anderson Museum of Art, which is made possible by a grant from the National Endowment for the Humanities, with additional support and funding from the Mississippi Humanities Council. And we have wonderful partners in this endeavor as well. and that's the Center for the Study of Southern Culture at the University of Mississippi. And as part of that, they've helped us identify scholars throughout the duration of this. And this is the 4th program of 7 that you're going to see before the end of the year. But tonight we're really thrilled and privileged to be joined by B. Brian Foster. He's a PhD at the University of Mississippi, writer and storyteller. He grew up in Mississippi and he's done work far beyond that, works there at the university now. And he and Zaire have some collaborations, I know, as well around his book, which is I Don't Like the Blues, Race, Place, and the Backbeat of Black Life. So that's some of what we're going to get into tonight. But if you haven't picked up the book, I encourage you to do that and see everything that's involved, because we're only going to be able to scratch the surface. But that's what this whole program is about scratching the surface and starting with Walter Anderson's art, but going deeper and wider and a little bit more expansive. So as we do, we'd like to start by orienting you in the collection. So the things that Walter Anderson made, people think about him obviously in relation to the Gulf Coast, but he did go on the Mississippi River and he had a relationship to it and other rivers as well. And he knew that these fed not only the Gulf of Mexico and other bodies of water, but they fed his soul and the soul and culture of peoples near and far. So with that being said, let's dive into the vault.
Walter Anderson had a deep fascination with water throughout his lifetime. He grew up as a young man sailing on the Gulf Coast and exploring the bayous and marshes of Louisiana. He was even so interested by the structure of water that he studied their elements and depicted them in block prints in both saltwater and freshwater. The Gulf of Mexico would not be what it is without the rivers that feed it, especially the big river, the Mississippi. To see how the Mississippi River shows up in Walter Anderson's work, we're going to jump over to the Little Room. Here we are in the Little Room. This is the personification that Walter Anderson painted of the Mississippi River. At the museum, we lovingly refer to her as the River Goddess. This figure was painted several times by Anderson, both in male and female form. The goddess's hair is blue, signifying the Mississippi River, and her antlers are the tributaries that feed into the mighty body of water. Walter Anderson had a deep fascination with the Mississippi River. In fact, after his marriage to Sissy in the 1930s, he took his young bride on a makeshift honeymoon down the Mississippi River by canoe.
So Brian, good to see you. We have our door open to us by Walter Anderson to talk about all this stuff ahead. But let me just start by asking you how you've been.
Good to be here, man. I've been all right, trying to insulate myself as best I can from the news of the world, the news of the day, the election, the climate, all the other things that are going on. But I've been doing okay. How you been?
Oh, I'm good. And we have a connection. I mean, I know we're both Tar Heels. So you got your master's degree from the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill. And I wanted to shout out one of our viewers who's tuning in from Chapel Hill. So, hey there, Susan. And but before we dive into talking in theory and in practice about all the work you've done, orient us about your upbringing, because I know part of this, the work you do, is about, revisiting things, revisiting Mississippi, revisiting the blues, and not just the blues, but in this example, certainly the blues. So tell us just a bit about why you came to this work and why it matters to you.
It's you use the language of revisiting, and that's been the story of my life in a lot of ways. I grew up in a small town in Northeast Mississippi, Shannon. I'm a Black boy from Shannon, Mississippi, something I say often. And I graduated high school in 2007. And really from then to now, my life has been about leaving the state, leaving my hometown and revisiting the state. I spent some time in Minnesota during my freshman and sophomore year of undergrad. Some family things happened. And so I came back to the SIP. I revisited, graduated from the University of Mississippi in 2011, then went to Chapel Hill, as you mentioned, and realized during my time at Chapel Hill, and really before, it's a much longer story, that I had these questions about race, questions about region, questions about community life in the South. And so I revisited again. I came back to the SIP, this time to the Mississippi Delta, to Clarksdale, which is where the bulk of my work in the last 4 or 5 years and longer, 5 or 6 years, has been in Clarksdale, in the Delta, to, as Sam Cooke says, Clarksdale's native son, by the river, right? He says, I was born by the river. Back to Chapel Hill for a little bit to write my dissertation. And then I revisited again. I came back in the capacity where I work now, assistant professor of sociology and Southern studies at the University of Mississippi. And so my life has been about, me doing a lot of revisiting, coming back to this place, the SIP, that made me, that's in my blood and my bones. And that I think because of that has given way to a set of questions that I can't shake, questions so deep and so wide that I've written a book about some of my journey to answer them. The book, I Don't Like the Blues, Race, Place, and the Backbeat of Black life, and questions that are still kind of echoing and that are motivating some new projects that I'm excited about. So it's funny that you use that language, revisiting, because I think in a lot of ways you can kind of tell the story of my life so far, with it.
No, that's awesome, and that opens up one of the first questions I wanted to ask you about, and we'll use the river as an entry point into this, but just to talk about geography. And the first program we had with Ralph Eubanks was way, it seems like a long time ago, just a couple months ago, though. and he was referencing this Heraclitus quote via Ralph Ellison, I believe, but geography is fate is what he was talking about, and this idea that we can't quite escape where we come from. But in your work in Clarksdale and then just more broadly thinking about a place like Mississippi and then the river, which has, we share the name with the river. And I think that's always going to be something that is different than maybe not to shout out Arkansas, but I think our relationship to the river just means something because it's our name, it's our namesake. Mississippi and the river are one and the same in many ways. But how do you think geography and the river, what role does that play in the lives of the people who live near it, live on it, and maybe who, unlike Zaire, haven't actually been in the middle of it, but still feel it?
Yeah, like so many things with me, I think one way I think about this question is with the song. I think it's Sly and the Family Stone, the same thing that'll make you laugh and make you cry. With the river and the importance of it to the people near it, the people around it, I think the same thing that'll make you laugh and make you cry, the same thing that'll make you or allow you or help you to live, has worked to result in a lot of folks, a lot of communities dying, right? We think of the river as this thing that gives life and sustenance to human and non-human animals, to the land, to the geographics or the landscape. And because of that capacity of giving life, we think about, what is a delta other than the deposition of sediment from a river. And the delta, because of its agricultural and economic potential, becomes a place, especially in the 19th century, of wherein indigenous folks are dispossessed of their land, wherein Black Americans, enslaved Black folks are trapped in this system, American slavery, the peculiar institution. And so kind of from a broad perspective, the river, I think one way to think about it is as the giver of life, as a thing that'll make you laugh, but also as at least sort of underwriting these broader systems that take life. Same thing will make you laugh and make you cry. And if I can just say really quickly, this is why I really like this Walter Anderson quote about the Mississippi River being something like the distillation of American life. I think this paradox of laughing and crying, living and dying is what this place, the U.S., has been for so many folks, especially Black folks, indigenous folks, communities of color. We think about there's actually a quote from a sociologist, Thomas Gerian, who says in a review essay maybe 20 years ago, early 2000s, he says that everything that we study, everything that sociologists study is in place. If you want to know about culture, you got to study place. You got to account for place. You got to think about place. If you want to study stratification and inequality, you got to talk about place. You want to understand identity and lived experience and community development, you got to talk about place. And that's a literal claim, a literal call to action. You got to talk about the streets and the sidewalks and the communities and the trees and the river. So I think one way to think about the river is as this thing that, whether because it's the source or because it leads to and feeds into these broader systems, as a thing that circumscribes, encapsulates, shapes everyday life, people's everyday lives, experiences, outcomes.
Yeah, and that Walter Anderson quote you had was right. He was on the river, and this was in the 1930s after getting married to his wife, Agnes Grinstead Anderson, better known as Sissy, that Maddie, our curator, was referring to in that clip to start the program. And yeah, he dipped his hat into the river and drank from it and called it a distillation of America. And what he was thinking about in all of his work was this dualism, and even more than that, this duality of the tangible world and the physical world, but then something beyond. And that was what he was talking about when he's talking about the river. It's not just a distillation of America physically, but it's also this idea. And I think what we're going to get into deeper is this sense that you mentioned that the blues is an expression of, which is, joy and pain living as one thing, and never, you can't separate the two. It's almost, it's like the strands of a thread. As soon as you try to pull one thing away, the whole thing disintegrates. So moving from the river, because it is such a big and inescapable force, but you already referenced that for the river to be a thing, for any body of water to be a thing, there has to be land obviously near it. So there's this terra firma, there's the land itself where people live, and the river still affects that landscape too. And talking about agriculture and these systems of the land and people, we're going to get into the blues in a minute specifically, but just as another pathway towards why the blues even exist. Can you give people a sense who may not fully understand, and maybe this is from a contemporary perspective, could be historical because the Delta is not the same as it always was, but talking about agriculture and those systems that emerge from the land when people come into contact with it, what's your, how do you sum that up for people who may not be from Mississippi, who may not quite understand?
Yeah, so we might think about like the history of people in the Delta region, the history of humans living in the Delta region as this long standing thing. People have always already been in the Delta forever, ever since way back when. In some ways, that is a true story when we think about if we imagine indigenous people as people, which is a difficult thing for some folks to do. But really the roots of so many of the contemporary kind of interpolations of human life in the Delta, really the roots of that is early 1800s. So not a super long time ago. And the reason that folks are attracted to the Delta region at this moment, early 1800s, is because of the agricultural and by extension, economic potential of the land. And we know that potential is directly tied. It's a straight line to the Mississippi River, right? As I've already mentioned. And so folks come to the Delta, white settlers come to the Delta in the early 1800s. And in a very short period of time, the Delta becomes Cotton Kingdom, becomes one of the wealthiest, one of the richest regions, not just in the South or in the US, but in the world globally. And it is that system of American slavery that we might think of as like casts a shadow over every epic, every historical period that comes after, right? So whether it's this brief period of Reconstruction, what are we reconstructing, right? This is a moment after the Civil War. The Civil War, if we listen to the folks who engaged in the battle, if we listen to the folks who made the decisions, the Civil War was about preserving the institution of American slavery, preserving this social and economic system that was so beneficial to this, to white folks, to this small collection of folks, planters in the region. Whether it's Reconstruction, whether it's the 50 years of sharecropping and tenant farming in the early 20th century, whether it's legalized apartheid, middle of the 20th century, think about mass incarceration, discrimination in the labor market and healthcare systems and education systems, wherever you look, I would argue, so many folks would argue, historian, MacArthur Genius Grant recipient Saidiya Hartman uses the language of the afterlives of slavery. Sociologists, social scientists use the language of the legacies of slavery. All of the ways that the institution of American slavery, if we think about the Delta, so from the early 1800s onward, shapes, circumscribes, raises social institutions, communities, the outcomes of folks. And so like there's I'll talk about, I'll maybe not get into too much detail, but I'll talk a little bit about the work of a geographer, Clyde Woods, who does some really, really important work of helping draw the line between American slavery in so much of the region's history, social, political, and otherwise, the region being the Mississippi Delta that have come to pass since.
Mm. Yeah, and I think the reason that it's so important to talk about this framework on the front end is because, the blues, as we'll get into, is an expression of all of this history and the present moments of the people who were creating the blues. But you can't escape and talk about one thing without talking about the past. And that's the oldest idea in Southern life, is that the past shapes who we are. So that's a critical piece. I want to bring in a Walter Anderson quote just to let him chime in a bit, because he did write about music. He saw music in the visual form and this synesthesia. But he talks about, in his case, that the pine trees, which used to grow all over here, the virgin longleaf pine savanna down here on the coast, that he saw these vertical notes strung on the horizontal lines of road and horizon. And those words about road and horizon just remind me of the Delta a bit, because if you're in the Delta, you know a lot about the horizon. That's almost all you can see, and that can feel inescapable. But so tell us now, before we kind of close out this segment and continue forward, let's introduce the blues a bit. We talk about, again, the Delta, this fertile crescent. It's not unlike the Nile River. Memphis, where Zaïre's living, that's named after the Egyptian city of Memphis. And so there's a tangible and understood connection from the time that this place was named, all these cities and landscapes named, of course, a second time from the people who lived here before. But that idea of the birthplace of civilization, these fertile crescents over in Mesopotamia, and the life-giving qualities of rivers, that's right next to the idea of the birthplace of American music, which of course is the blues. So why did the blues emerge? It seems like an easy question to ask, but maybe not so much one to answer. Why did they emerge, and what it was and maybe is their function?
Yeah, so it's a perfect transition, because I just mentioned this geographer, Clyde Woods. I think that the most important piece of work, the most important piece of scholarship in the blues tradition, if you want to understand what the blues is, if you want to understand the conditions that produce the blues, I think the most important piece of scholarship that you can read is a book by the name of Development Arrested. I think it's plantation, it's power and plantation in the Mississippi, or it's race and power in the Mississippi Delta, or something like that. But it's Development Arrested. Clyde Woods, the blues and plantation power in the Mississippi Delta. And what Clyde Woods argues is his fundamental point is, before we get to music, before we get to the idea of blues as music or performance, we should start with this notion that the blues is a method. It's a method of sense making. It's a method of moving through the world at a particular moment in time. So the years after the fall of American slavery, so this period of Reconstruction and afterwards, and for a particular group of people, Black Southerners, Black Scipians, Black folks in the Mississippi Delta. So the blues, Clyde Woods argues, it's not just about like hard times. You had a difficult time with something. The blues is a function of a particular racialized Black and regionalized Southern Mississippi Delta experience. And in this experience of the afterlife of slavery and then Reconstruction and then sharecropping and tenant farming, what Black folks in the South and the SIP and the Delta did was try to survive, was try to get from sun up to sundown, from Monday to Friday, from January to December. And in the quest to survive, they did stuff, they built stuff, they said stuff, they made stuff. All of those things, the doing and the making and the building and the saying, are a part of, again, this set of blues methods that Black folks use, again, to survive and get from day to day. Out of this set of methods comes, as we know of human life, comes like sound, like music, comes rhythms, comes a particular lyrical tradition. That music and rhythms and lyrical traditions have come to be called blues music. And so if we follow the work of Clyde Woods, which again, I think is the most important text to read if you want to understand what the blues is, I think we begin with the point that blues is a method of sense making. It's a method of survival, and not just, any old method of survival and surviving any set of hardships, but it's a method of survival born of a particular experience of a particular people, Black folks, in a particular place, the rural American South, at a particular point in time, after the fall of American slavery and in those first few decades afterwards. So we're getting into the early 20th century. And then once we establish that as the baseline, blues as method of sense making that grows from, the root is the root, the seed is the seed that grows from the experiences and perspectives and sensibilities of Black folks. Then we can talk about the music. We can talk about Delta blues, Hill Country, Memphis, Chicago, Piedmont, Texas. We can talk about the ways that the blues has gone around the world and come back. But the starting point, the root is the root, the seed is the seed, the experiences, perspectives of Black folks trying to survive and make do and build a life and family and communities as this system, American slavery and everything afterwards, was trying to kill them and stop them from doing and making all of that. Yeah.
And I mean, and that symbol of and the metaphor of a tree and the seed and you go into depth in this in the book, but I think it's we can talk, everything can be, a tree in some ways. I mean, these natural forms are so useful to try to understand these complex systems, because we live in a complex system, and nature is even more complex than we are.
Place matters. Life takes on the shape. Life mimics the functions of the places in which life happens.
Yep. Well, before we do, because this tees up Zaire's work nicely, her first video, but I do want to bring in a few. I'll have to shout out Susan one more time, because after we gave her some credit, she did want to say "Go Heels," so let's
go Heels. Go Heels. Tar Heels.
And Marsha, thank you for watching from Madison. Got Northeast Mississippi in here, and Jackson, and we've also got a colleague of yours from University of Mississippi. So gotta
hey, what's up, Ashley?
So we're going to talk more about all of this, and as many of you who've watched these programs before are eagerly awaiting, we do have two different videos this evening that are made by the inimitable Zaire Love. So we're going to take you now onto the river via the lens of Zaire.
Well, the Mississippi River is a universe of freedom and beauty and endless color and light, and makes me feel whole. It's the one place I feel like I'm a complete person and part of everything. And I just feel good when I'm on the river.
She keeps flowing, she keeps flowing. Keep out of my secrets with her, all of my secrets with her. Queen Mississippi River. It's been too.
Man, my relationship with the river it's so intertwined, because growing up next to the river, I'm always on the side of the river, fishing from the shore. I should see boats come up and down the river, and I should always go. If I can get out there in the middle of the river, I can catch more fish. but now I have the opportunity to build boats that can paddle the river, and it's so rewarding. And one of the biggest things it's done for me is I lost my mother when I was 13, and I didn't have time to grieve, because the survival skills kick in, and when I'm out there on the river, I get a chance to grieve, and it's one of the best feelings. I think that if I wouldn't have done that, I don't think I'd be the person I am today.
It is a place of endless exploration. And every time we come out, we see something different and learn something new about the river, about the world, and ultimately about ourselves. Because all exploration begins here.
When you get out there, you can leave a lot of things there and come back whole. And I like to tell people all the time, the river is my church.
The Mississippi River, she keeps flowing. Oh, she keeps going. She keeps going.
First, we always got to give a little clap to Zaire, of course.
Wow. Yes.
And that was a wonderful piece, one of my favorites that she's put together. And some of the things that were said in there that I didn't even plan on necessarily addressing until I saw what she had made. Mark River is talking about, it's very personal ways that he experiences nature that are so aligned and intertwined with his experience. And that's one, he talks about grieving on the river, where he needed to find a place where grief was acceptable. And I would venture to say the blues in some ways is not dissimilar from that. It's an art form and a vessel for that, but also that the river is his church. I wonder when you watch that, are there any things that stick out to you? I mean, I love the way art forms resonate against each other. This is part of the reality of being alive, is that we're connected to everything. It seems oversimplified, but every time we see a new art form, it's inevitably going to reinforce and again revisit something else that we've personally had a connection to. So what's your reaction to that?
Yeah, I mean, the thing that is so much. We could spend the rest of our time together talking just about kind of riffing off of their really beautiful work by Zaire. But the thing that stands out, that struck me first, is just how personal Mark River talked about the importance of the river, for his life, and like processing really heavy life altering, right? Turning points, sociology, we call them turning points. These events that change the shape and arc of your life, right? He talks about grieving the death of his mother. For me, I think about growing up in rural Mississippi, and ain't no river in Shannon, but we did have what we call the path, which is this folks would so it's a part of our community in a pasture, and kids from one side of the community would take this route to get to the houses, and the kids on the other side of the community. The path becomes like a meeting place. It becomes like a mechanism for socialization, for building friendships and building family. One of my closest, I call her my sister. She's my cousin. I grew up with her ever since I can remember. I've known her, and so many of like those moments that seem larger than life when you're an adolescent, 15, 16 years old, thinking about high school graduation or processing like a win or after a football game on Friday, happen on the path or happen under the street lights. There's a lake not too far. Like all of again, place matters. Catherine McKittrick says Black matters are spatial matters, which is another way of saying the world that we live in, geographic landscape in which and by which our lives play out, it shapes us. It shapes who we are, identity, perspective. And so the thing that resonates the most is just how deeply personal, the landscape, deeply personal place is and can be for and to us.
Yeah. And again, and to turn more specifically to some of your work in Clarksdale, I wanted to read a little bit of a poem from Walter Anderson where he again is talking about music. And this is an excerpt from it, but I'm going to read the whole thing. It says, "All movement is to invisible music, although few people hear it. It comes from the sun and the wind and the movement of water and a running rabbit and a crowing cock, and together it is part of a great symphony. The longer we listen and the quieter we are, the more we hear. And when we do hear, we are part of the music instead of an unwelcome interruption." So thinking about, invisible music is another one of those paradoxes that we can tease out, because the blues is anything if invisible in terms of its tourism, life and the development that's occurred around it. And we'll talk a little bit about that too today. But when you think just about this idea of invisibility versus visibility, especially in a place like the Delta, and Mississippi, which is known all across the world, for anyone who's from Mississippi and has traveled at all you have to do is tell someone you're from Mississippi, and either you'll meet someone who knows who you are and maybe knows your family, or they'll just know where you come from and they'll have an idea about it. But that doesn't always mean they really know. So what do you think about this idea of invisible music, either maybe manifest in a very real way in terms of maybe the blues men and women you met, or more kind of philosophically?
I want to go the latter route. I want to think like philosophically, theoretically. And it's funny that the quote from Walter Anderson uses this language of quiet, because I think one framework for I think dealing with this idea of invisibility in the context of like everyday life and lived experience, which is what I hear in the poem, is that, this invisible music, if we listen to it the right way, can be instructive, can teach us something about the world that we live in. But Walter Anderson uses the language of quiet, and I think a framework that I think will help us kind of think it through actually comes from this book, The Sovereignty of Quiet, Beyond Resistance in Black Culture, written by cultural studies scholar, cultural theorist Kevin Quashie. And there's a short quote: "As an identity, Blackness is always supposed to tell us something about race, racism or America, or violence and struggle and triumph, or poverty and hopefulness." This idea that, and you'll notice, right, that so many of my answers begin with Black folks, Black communities, Black identity, Black people. That is what my work is about. That is the prism through which I do everything that I do. And so this idea, as an identity, Blackness is always supposed to tell us something about race, about racism, about America, so forth and so on. We follow that script so well. That quote, I think, captures the reality of race and Blackness in the America so well that we sometimes, and the we here is society, it's a royal we, right? Society at large. We sometimes forget like the people part of Black people, or the folks part of Black folks, and we only see the Black, because the Blackness, again, is supposed to be a lesson about something, a clue about something, a cue, a trigger, and not seeing the people or the folks, but only the Blackness. I think it's a theme so pervasive. It's a reality that has been so heavy for Black folks, that one of the most recurring themes in Black literature, in Black scholarship, in Black music, in poetry, is this idea of invisibility. There's a book, there's probably 5 or 6 books that I return to every year, maybe every couple years. Invisible Man by Ralph Ellison is one of them. I was reading it earlier this year, and there's a funny quote, and I say funny because he talks about sociologists, right? So presumably he's writing then about, I'm a sociologist. So he's writing then about me and my colleagues. Now he says, again, on this idea of invisibility, despite the bland assertion of sociologists, high visibility, again, when society only sees the Black and not the people, and you can see the Black everywhere, wherever you look, however you look, despite the bland assertion of sociologists, high visibility actually rendered one invisible, whether at high noon in a Macy's window or illuminated by flaming torches and flash bulbs while undergoing the ritual sacrifice that was dedicated to the ideal of white supremacy. And so again, there's so much about the Black American experience that because of the racial project, because of racism, racial domination, some of the assumptions, the stereotypes that have become attached to Blackness, like Black life, so many parts of it have been rendered invisible. And I think there's some parallels there with this poem, with this quote from Walter Anderson. And what my work does, what you get in I Don't Like the Blues, and you'll hear anytime you hear me talk for more than a few minutes is to say, what my work does, it says that like there's actually some value in those parts of Black life that have been rendered invisible. There's some interpretive value, some analytic value. In some ways, I'm doing the thing that Kevin Kwashi is like, why we always got to do that? Why we always got to look to Blackness to teach us something? Why do we always got to look for Black life to answer some broader set of questions? So in some ways, I'm falling into that trap. But I'm doing it in a different way. I'm saying, let's not force Blackness to mean something. Let's account for the fullness of what Blackness is. It's hopefulness and aspiration and optimism. It's also, to use the language of Kevin Kwashi, quiet. It's also, to use the language of the folks that I talk to in Clarksdale and in the Delta and the Mississippi Hill Country, it's also frustrated and tired and angry. And some of those things that we aren't so excited to talk about or think about. And so in that way, this theme of invisibility, this theme that courses through and underwrites Black life of invisibility rears its head again. I'm just saying, like, what happens if we squint real hard? What happens if we, as I say, listen in a different way, so to speak, to that invisibility? If we step into that invisibility, what might we learn? What might we see? What might we hear?
Yeah, no, that's powerful. And it's another thing you write about, which is in the title of the book, which is the backbeat. And so I think, again, to give people a way to understand, blind spots or just the melodies or the people or whatever noun you want to throw in there that are beneath the surface. So for all of us out here who aren't musicologists or sociologists or maybe have a dead ear, what is the backbeat, and how does that help you understand what the blues is?
Yeah, so a backbeat is like a type of rhythm. Like it's a way of structuring, of emphasizing different parts of a rhythm. For a long time, Western music asked us to clap on the 1 and the 3, emphasize the 1 and the 3. So think about a song written in common time. So like 1, 2, 3, 4. For a long time, Western music goes 1, 2, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. The blues sound, what we get from the rhythmic, the communicative traditions of West Africa, the blues sound says, well, what happens if we just shift a little bit? What happens if we don't clap on the 1 and 3, emphasize the 1 and the 3? What happens if we clap on the 2 and 4? So not 1, 2, 3, 4, but 1, 2, 3, 4. That subtle shift, that small shift, if we think about music, if we think about the blues sound, unlocks an entirely new, opens up a new world of possibilities for Western music. You can't listen to a song now, rap, soul, country, whatever. You can't listen to a song now and not hear a backbeat somewhere. And so what my work does is like my work says, first, the reason that the blues uses the backbeat like that is because Black folks move in the world like that. Again, back to this idea of the blues, not as music first, but as a method of living and making sense of your life first. Why the blues sound like it do? Because Black life looked like it did. And so my work says the blues sounds like this and uses the backbeat like this because Black folks and Black life does. And then secondarily, it says that shift, in the same way that it unlocks a whole world of possibilities for Western music, if we transport that to the world of the social sciences, that shift to the backbeat, where we pay attention to that which we typically don't, where we clap on and emphasize that which we typically have not. That shift will unlock a whole world of possibilities for understanding the ebbs and flows of Black life, for addressing the challenges that hamper and raise and dispossess Black communities. I could go on and on and on. So that's a little bit about what the backbeat is. More importantly, though, how kind of what I try to do with the backbeat in my own work as an analytic device for thinking about Black identity, racial epistemology, community development, and I could go on.
Yeah. Well, at the very least, you've given some people a project, which is to listen to the music they're hearing and understand that there's something more that's going on there. And when I was even trying to, remind myself of what that meant, I did the same thing. And it's totally true that it revolutionized not just blues music, but every form of American music that followed. So this is a good place to segue again because Zaire's as if she was, mapping out the program for us. She's got a little bit of a segment to go a little deeper into the blues. So we'll join y'all on the other side here.
Everything leads me back to the feeling of the blues, or the feeling that I get from playing or singing the blues or hearing others sing and play it. In fact, I think life itself is the blues. Life itself is the blues. Life itself is the blues. The earliest sounds of blues that I can remember was while in the fields, while people would be picking cotton or chopping cotton or something. Usually one guy would be plowing by himself, or maybe one guy would take his hoe and chop way out in front of everybody else. And usually you would hear this guy sing.
Just above a knee. That's that thing you call a stingery. Little Fro Day, she puts that thing on me. Oh, I wake up in the morning about the break of day. Well, I give you all my money and you go downtown. Get back in the evening when the sun goes down. Oh, baby, you don't have to go. I'm gonna pack up, darling. Down the road I'll go. Blues. Because we used to plow the folks here at home and chop cotton daylight in the morning. The niggas get out there and wait till the Lord to be even looking at the sun. So hurry, sundown, let the morning shine. And when the sun go out, they didn't stop work to wake them so hard. They learn the blues from that. And then they learn the blues from the women. You can get the blues by the woman. Go kiss and hug and won't see her till 3-4 nights looking for her, you get the blues there.
Life itself is the blues.
So now we're firmly in the music of it. We've talked a lot about how we got here, and now we're hearing a lot of this. And again, what that video was meant to do is to bridge that gap, between the past and the present, to bring those together. And one of the things I was thinking about when we were preparing for this program, is B.B. King, who obviously was featured there, and that's the work of Bill Ferris, who was a pioneering folklorist and has created a foundation for a lot of the blues scholarship that followed. And then also we were obviously talking about Walter Anderson. These are big mythic figures. Certainly B.B. King, when we're talking about the blues, he sort of becomes the prism through which a lot of people understand. And he is one of many big names in the blues, obviously. But then the blues tradition is not a form that grew out of celebrity. It became that, but that's certainly not what it's all about. So I think that and then Walter Anderson, I think when we were thinking about what this means, it's really the project that we're endeavoring with this whole project here, the Southern Art Wider World Project, which is to think about what people think they know about these big mythic folks, and then to take that a little deeper and beyond just the surface. So let's jump in there. I mean, we can talk about blues development, and I know that's part of the book. We could talk about Bill Ferris even, and the folks who you work with still, but who came before you and myself. How do you approach that idea of, the truth that no people are monoliths, and also the idea that there are those amongst us who become so well known and so lauded that they do carry, this perhaps outsized but deserved, fame and power to define, how we understand things. They bring it to new light. At the same time, they can't bring it all.
I so appreciate this question. I really, really appreciate this question, because it gets at one of my fundamental beefs, one of the fundamental points of tension that I have with the current state of blues scholarship, which I'm defining as those folks who write about blues men and blues women, who write about the lyric tradition in blues music, who write about sort of the genre history of blues music, is that they give, the whole of blues scholarship gives this outsized, to use your language, significance to the voices of the blues women and blues men who have become most famous or most synonymous with the sound. Whatever B.B. King says goes, whatever Muddy Waters says goes, whatever Bessie Smith says goes, and so forth and so on. And I think that again, you said outsized, but deserved, I think, is the language. It's not to say, from my perspective, that respect isn't deserved, that centering the perspectives of those folks isn't deserved. It's to say, though, that those perspectives ain't the only ones. There's a really another important book, I think, in the kind of tradition of blues scholarship, written by Leroy Jones. Some people might know him as Amiri Baraka. And the name of the book is the punchline of everything I just said. The name of the book is Blues People. And so from my perspective, and this is what I try to get at in my own work, I Don't Like the Blues, is that just like we should be listening to B.B. King and Muddy Waters and Bessie Smith and Son House and so forth and so on, we should be listening to those folks in Clarksdale and in Greenville and in Greenwood. And you close your eyes and put your finger on the map of the Mississippi Delta. We should be listening to those folks too, because they blues people too. And if we listen to them, we get a much more complicated portrait. We get a much more complicated idea of what the blues is. We get this idea that blues ain't just about the backbeat and ad-libbing and call and response. It's about American slavery and the violence that exacted on the lives of Black folks, and how it continues to arrest the development to honor Clyde Woods and his work of Black communities, of Black places. And so, I think I get chills when I hear B.B. King talking about his craft. I love the HBO special Bessie, where we try to bring her life, the life of Bessie Smith, the story of Bessie Smith to life. I so appreciate the emphasis that we place on the perspectives and lives of the famous blues folks. I just think we do ourselves harm, and we limit ourselves when we assume that they are the only blues folks. Black Southerners, Black Scipians, Black Deltons, Black folks in Clarksdale, Black folks in the Brickyard and the Round Yard and Riverton and Clarksdale, they are blues people too. They voices matter too. What my work and I Don't Like the Blues does is try to put their voices and perspectives on the record.
Yeah, no, that's great. And before, I'm going to tee you up for kind of the whole I Don't Like the Blues thing here in a second, and let you run with that. While we are talking about this, and in retrospect of looking at that video and the kind of inside baseball thing, I know, Bill Ferris, who we both know, and I take it many people who are watching this either know or know of. obviously we want to celebrate him because he did do so many wonderful things without which we wouldn't have that archival video. And just an inside baseball question, how do you, and what's it been like being of your generation? And certainly I think of your color, you participate in these conversations that for so long, for whatever reason, good or ill, a lot of the scholarship was done by white men, and that's great. And it's for what they were able to document. And that you also need the Brian Fosters to come in and write the next chapter to revisit. It's just part of the whole ecology. So what's that been like?
I want to say first, I really appreciate the work of Bill Ferris. Bill Ferris has been so kind to me, just personally. Bill Ferris, blurb, I Don't Like the Blues. He gives this really beautiful perspective about my work. I so appreciate it. And I appreciate his work in putting the voices of Black communities, of blues women and blues men on the record. My mission statement is putting the stories of the Black South, of the Black SIP, Black Mississippi, putting those stories on the record to say that we were here and we felt a way about stuff. We had ideas and dreams, and these rich cultural traditions that, though they are rooted in violence and pain, can still be and are beautiful and underwrite so many parts of American culture. And Bill Ferris, by virtue of recording and archiving the voices of so many people over so long a period of time, I think is a seminal figure in the blues scholarship or blues writing tradition. To talk about my own, kind of locate my own self in it, I think, and maybe I don't know if it's come through in some of my answers so far, but there may be like some frustration, I'll just say frustration in what I saw as, in reading so many. So let me say really quickly, I Don't Like the Blues my work in Clarksdale didn't start as a blues project. It became a blues project because of what I was hearing from the folks with whom I was spending so much time. And once it becomes a blues project, I go to the work, I go to the literature, I go to what folks have had to say about the blues and race and the blues and region. And there's a frustration, a frustration that is born of, I've made my case already, that I think is born of a fundamental disconnect, a fallacy in the way that we define what the blues is. And the fallacy is that it's music first. That we got to do the genre history first, that we got to talk about chord structures and the blues scale first, that we got to distinguish between Delta and Hill Country and so forth first. And in doing that, I think the fallacy would be fine if it was only theoretical, or if it was only about music and performance. But the fallacy is dangerous because if we focus on the music, I would argue so many folks, Clyde Woods, Leroy Jones, Emily Lordy, I could keep going. The work of so many folks have argued, if we focus on the music and don't give some accounting to the conditions that birthed it, conditions that continue to shape the lives of Black folks. If we don't talk about those conditions first, it ain't if we don't give some accounting of the conditions, I think we lose an opportunity. I think we lose an opportunity to address some of the challenges that folks are facing and reckoning with today. Maybe we'll get to it in a sec. I know we're running close on time, but so much of what I heard from folks in Clarksdale, so much of what underwrites this idea of I Don't Like the Blues was of a dissatisfaction with what is happening in the place where I live. Is the difficulty of living in a place where poverty rates have been among the nation's highest ever since. Go look, close your eyes, put your finger on the year, and poverty rates in the Delta, in Clarksdale, wherever, are going to be among the highest in the country. Where the healthcare system, where the primary healthcare provider in Clarksdale, I think it's Northwest Regional Medical Center, a few years ago, we thought it was not going to be anymore. The company who owns the medical center went bankrupt. So we thought we were going to lose wherever you look, the education system, people are struggling to live. And if we go all the way back to this long shadow of American slavery, much of it ain't they fault, despite the talking points of your favorite, pundits. And that's what I don't like the blues is about. That's what the blues is about. It's about critiquing the conditions of my everyday life, critiquing the structures that are causing me pain and that are killing the people I care about. And so yeah, I mean, locating myself in the tradition of folks who do work on and about the blues, abiding, I guess is the word I'm looking for, feeling is one of frustration, because I think in the fallacy of calling the blues music first, or calling the blues music and only music, in that fallacy, is pain in the lives of real people, and not just and not just a chord structure or blues scale, but like people in communities and lived experience.
Yeah, no, that's powerful stuff. And I'm going to turn it back to you in a second. I want to hear some of what the people told you a little bit more about that. And I'll just tag my own little love letter to Bill Ferris for my relationship with him too. And he was my neighbor growing up in Oxford when my father was there at the university. And for anyone who, first of all, a little tangent, if you want to know when the golden years of Oxford, Mississippi was, it was the early to mid 90s before Eli Manning got there and all the condos went up. And then at University of Chapel Hill, University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill, I remember Bill's Southern music class when he would fly up in the same way he brought B.B. King to his Yale students in the earlier decades. He would bring up Top Notch the Villain, this Clarksdale rapper, to Chapel Hill. And I just remember what Top Notch was telling me, and I never did track him down. Again, I hope he's still making music, but he wasn't telling us about the music, which was the thing. He was telling us about his watch, which was not a Rolex. He made a point to say, I use this to tell time. There was this idea that the creative juices that someone has nothing to do or should have nothing to do with the fame it might engender. And that was the exact same thing that Walter Anderson was struggling with during his lifetime. You have to make the bills and all this, but what's the point of creating if that's the outcome? It's more about the process than the product, and so forth. So shout out to Bill. I think he obviously understands all this as well as anybody, and I know he's proud of having folks like you come through and revisit and critique not him, but the ideas that undergird the work that he was trying to do too, which is such a complicated thing that no one generation can accomplish. So that being kind of a prologue, tell us a bit. I want to have it on an uplifting note, but I want you to all these problems, and you can talk a bit more about what they look like with blues tourism specifically, which I think is sort of the large elephant in the room that you've been alluding to about survival and economics and sociology and music all intertwined, and tourism and what the looking in from outside can do in a negative way as much as it can bring dollars in a positive way. All that being said, tell us a little bit about the state of Clarksdale that you kind of found and the citizens that you were interacting with, and what we should know and think about, maybe a solutions base. Like, what if this is the map that and we'll pull in the map idea, because you talked about the blues as a method and a map to understanding the people who made it and played it, where they located themselves in the world. But for us, just normal folks who are occupying this world with everybody else and trying to understand the systems that are here, what would you tell people is the place that we should be looking to get to when it comes to something like the blues, when it comes to the shortcomings of our idea of tourism being the only solution, when it comes to our short-sightedness or the things we can't hear?
I'll tell a story quickly of the woman whose words are on the cover, the woman who first said, "I don't like the blues." In the book, her name is I call her Miss Irene, and she was when she was alive, she since passed, the director of a funeral home in Clarksdale. And I was talking to her in her office, and And at one point we were talking about music, like what kind of music do you like? What kind of music do you listen to? And she talks about like she loves Marvin Gaye and Luther Vandross. And she's like, what's the guy that sings Mom's Apple Pie? You're like, Mom's Apple Pie? Tyrone Davis. And she's like, I like him. I love him. And then a little bit afterwards, I asked her, Tyrone Davis is a Southern soul blues singer. I asked her, how do you feel about that, the blues? And this is where she says, I don't like the blues. It saddens me. And it became clear in the moment. This is the moment. This is the moment where my work in Clarksdale becomes a blues project, because it becomes clear that the blues is like a lot. It's a lot packed up in there. How can you love Tyrone Davis and Mom's Apple Pie and then 20 seconds later say, I don't like the blues, it saddens me? And then as we talk more and more, your focus shifts to downtown in Clarksdale, where Ground Zero and all of those places are, blues clubs, blues museums, heritage markers. Your focus shifts there, and there's this sense of frustration and dissatisfaction. And what I heard from Miss Irene, and for so many of the other folks who talked how she talked, who said some of the same things she said, what I heard from her is a couple of things. One, like, listen to us. Yes, the idea that blues tourism, that rooting an economic development agenda in tourism, that ain't no new idea. Go look in Orlando, go look at Disney. Like, that ain't no new idea. The idea that will generate new revenue streams, will bring more money to the town, to the area, of course, absolutely. And if we look at the cost, if we look at how much money, where the money has come from in Clarksdale and in the Delta, absent tourism and blues tourism in particular is a big part of that. What Black folks in Clarksdale said to me, I ain't arguing, this ain't no argument, this is just me telling y'all what somebody told me. What Black folks in Clarksdale said to me is like we didn't ask for, we was just like, what we want is to send our children. We want to send our young people to a school where we can trust that they will get the best instruction, where their materials won't be outdated and raggedy. What Black folks in Clarksdale told me is, I want to be able to go somewhere and see a physician and trust that I'm getting the best care, that I'm getting quality care, and that I can count on that the next time I go, and the next time I need to go, and when my auntie needs to go, and when my grandma needs to go. What Black folks in Clarksdale told me is, I would like to work at a workplace that will pay me enough money to live. That's what I'm asking for. I ain't asked for no Ground Zero or no blues museum or no blue. I asked for a better stake in life. I asked for opportunities to improve my life standing. So one thing that I heard from Miss Irene in that conversation in her office, and that I heard from so many of the other folks that I talked to, is listen to the concerns that we have. Listen to the aspirations that we have for this place. Black folks in Clarksdale love Clarksdale and love the Delta. Listen to the aspirations that we have for this place. That's the first thing, is listen. I end the book again with the words of Miss Irene, and I ask, what do you want for this place moving forward? I ask that to everybody. I ask this to Miss Irene. She says, for us to have something that can be ours. I ain't asked her who the us was. It could have been her family. It could have been Black folks in Clarksdale. I suspect it was Clarksdale. I could say more. The two things. If we're gonna get practical, and I don't know if this is getting to the uplifting part or not, but I think A is, and this is I think a smaller version of the American story writ large, is A, listen to the folks who are in pain. Listen to the folks who are struggling to live and overcome a challenging set of life circumstances. And honor their stories. And there's a bigger conversation about public officials. Folks want a set of elected officials that they tell me that actually care about the place and its people. And I could go on with more, with more like folks talk about good jobs, work that jobs that pay, a living wage. But I think the root of it, the root is the root, the seed is the seed is listen to everybody in this place, not just the folks who got a little money or who have a social network that might, bring a new business, a new fancy shiny business to the square, but like listen to everybody and try and address the concerns and honor the aspirations of everybody. And let's see what might happen.
Yeah, that's right on. And, I'm going to bring Zaire back in here to close out with us. But I think one of the things that I like to think about, we're in the business of meaning making, trying to find connections, but they're there if you look. And, when I think about Walter Anderson aesthetically, he was a master of negative space. He would not color in everything, or exclude areas to draw your attention to them or back to the other thing. And that's what we've been talking about a lot here tonight with what we hear, what we see, and what we don't. And, if we can kind of repackage one of Walter Anderson's messages, it would be to understand the beauty and the possibility of your surroundings, whatever those surroundings may look like. And that may be the natural world, it may be the urban landscape, it may be your neighbors and so forth. But I think at this moment in world history, that's a good bit of advice to take with us. Zaire, so just chime in now. You got anything you want to ask Brian? I know y'all know each other well, so you may have asked him everything you have to ask, or just things you've been thinking about while you've been listening.
Yeah, I think I have thoughts, and I think I also have like a fun question, not necessarily, one to like dig deep into the soul of, of y'all. But while listening, I couldn't help but think about like the everydayness and the magic and how that's so magical, and how some of our great, artists, or some of the great work that we like hold in such esteem is just about the everydayness of, life. If you think about Walter Anderson's work, a lot of his art, no matter what medium, is about his life, his everyday, the everydayness of what he's saying. And he's trying to, show us that too. I.e. the blues as well, is this everydayness of like, this is what is going on. This is what's happening in my life. And I'm saying like how that the everydayness affects art in such a way and it's elevated, right? It's elevated with the talent being Walter Anderson, knowing how to paint and draw and do those things. The blues and that, like, it's elevated because, okay, you can hold a tune, you can play a guitar, you can play a harmonica, you use your voice, you clap your hands, you stomp your feet, And so I just think like that point of us really honing into what's happening every day that I can elevate with my talent and leave for the world. So I asked that of you, Brian, even of you, Julian, like in your everyday, like what's that one thing that you feel like, I can take this out of my everyday and heighten that and put it out into the world, and that be my offering?
For me, it's language. I don't remember a time in my life where I haven't had a reading practice, where I didn't read, and absolutely love it. One of my favorite things to do is read. Similarly, I don't remember a time in my life where I hadn't been writing something down somewhere. And I listen to folks in conversation. I'm fascinated with like how people remember things. You ask somebody something, and it's something that they don't remember right off. What do they do next? What do they say? What does their face do? What does their body do? I love asking folks how to spell their names, or somebody mentions a name. So you spell that with an IE or with a Y. And so what I try to do in my everyday is honor language, is treat literature, fiction, scholarship, music, with the reverence that I think it deserves, and to honor the language of others, the voices of others, to listen to what folks have to say. I think that I'm an okay writer. I practice. I write every day. I want to be a good writer. I practice to be a good writer. I practice, right? And so what I try to do in my writing is honor language in in similar ways, and the way people spell their names and how people will turn phrase. And I mean, we have had these conversations about how beautiful, how beautiful language is, in particular the language of Black folks. And so I think that's my mind is language.
Mm. Yeah, I mean, I won't go off too much about myself, because I think the thing that I also appreciate is, walking down the street or walking in a convenience store or talking to any old person on the street, the wisdom that they have that they might not even know, to be able to take that maybe for yourself, but more importantly, to either document it or to remember it and then to share it back out in some fashion, or to bring people together, through programs or whatever the case may be, or just a conversation, people like y'all who have things to share. I mean, Zaire, I think that everydayness, that was the most mundane, obvious example of what all this is, but I hadn't thought of that as a way of summing up what we've talked about. But I think it's very true. I mean, not only in blues, but talking about the talents that you're bringing to the films you're making here, but also your film work that you're doing, and actually spending the time as your fine artwork that is not on a deadline that I'm asking you to do based on Brian's schedule or the other scholars' schedule. But I think that's a wonderful way of summing up. I mean, I think that really is it. The everyday, I always say, when I went to school, I thought I was going to be a fiction writer. I had my fiction heroes, and learned pretty quick I'm not a great fiction writer, but I also learned that the stories out in the world were, for me at least, much more compelling. The real stories, much more compelling than anything I could make up. And so to lean on that, not for my own creative exploits necessarily, but just for the edification of seeing how people live their lives, and all the strange and enigmatic and funny and heartwarming things that happen on a daily basis, that if we are not careful, as Walter Anderson would tell us, we can just walk right by, we wouldn't even know. And so to venture out a little bit of our comfort zone, and to not be so ruled by the 9 to 5 or the next thing we have to get to sit in the moment just for a second, and to look around and to appreciate what possibility there is, wherever we might find ourselves. So, but I will say, just to close, I mean, we do live in an epic landscape. So Mississippi, as every day as it is, we're as epic a place as there is to find. And I've been really blessed to have y'all on the program today. So Brian, thank you. I know we do this when people want to let us know that the book is on the list, so people are intrigued to read, and I know they'll enjoy. And I know people are always championing what Zaire's been doing as well. So let's close out, and y'all say bye to everybody out there. But thank y'all so much for joining us tonight. And I look forward to seeing y'all again soon.
So grateful to be here. Thanks for having me, and for the really thoughtful questions, Julian. And as always, Zaire, thank you for the work. Thank you for the work, man. Like that. You're talented. You got a gift, and thank you for that. Thank you for these last comments. And thank y'all. Thanks everybody who joined us.
Thank you. Well, y'all enjoy your evening, everybody out there, and we'll see you next time. Southern Art, Wider World. Let's kick it out the door.